Hi, my name is Tom, and this is my wife, Heather.
Hello.
And you are listening to us, well, you're watching us, but mainly listening to us on what I think is the simplest portable podcasting setup you can get. We're just using two Rode Interview Pro microphones.
Yes, we are.
Yeah, and they are recording internally. 32-bit float, baby. And what that means is we don't need to check levels. We don't need to run cables. There's not even a receiver on the camera because we're recording internally. The camera is actually super far away. I'm using a 70 to 200 millimeter lens just to make us even feel more kind of like this is it. We're just holding two microphones.
Just two microphones in the woods.
Yeah, two turntables, two microphones at a table. Okay. So you've done a lot of podcasting, right?
Yes.
Okay. And you're not a gearhead.
I am not a gearhead.
You're the opposite of me because
Yes.
you're just like, I just want it to be simple.
Off and on, but works good.
You saw the behind the scenes. How simple was this?
That's very simple. Yes. You just turn this on basically.
Yeah, I just handed you the microphone and turned it on, and that's it. And now we're getting a podcast. The beauty of the 32-bit float audio, which is why I like using these, or one of the reasons I like using these, is that it doesn't matter how loud or how quiet we are. Everything can be evened out when we edit. Now, speaking of editing, I do want to take a minute and sort of explain a little bit about the editing process. So here is this footage that we filmed in Final Cut Pro, and there are a few different ways that you can edit when you have two of these microphones together. In this case right here, I basically have my audio and Heather's audio. So this is just the file from the microphone I was using, and the other one is the file from the microphone Heather was using. And that's it. Just drag and drop, sync them up, and you're good to go. But I did probably make a little bit of a mistake when we were filming here because if you look at this, we are very, very close together. We are like shoulders touching, overlapping. This specific microphone is intended to be an interview microphone, and the omnidirectional pickup pattern is intended to be something that you can literally just hold in between you and the person you're talking to and pick both of you up so you don't have to keep going back and forth. What that means is in a situation like this where we are so close together, instead of each of us having our own microphone, we could have probably just used one microphone right in between us and it would have picked both of us up. And the reason I might have wanted to do that here instead is to reduce mic bleed, which is my voice on Heather's microphone and Heather's voice on my microphone. We're so close together that there is some mic bleed. So this is what it sounds like when I just have the audio files lined up like normal and both playing at the same time. Critically acclaimed podcast in the middle of the woods right now, but believe it or not, you don't have to just use this setup in the middle. I don't know if you can hear that, but there's a little bit, it almost sounds like there's a little bit of an echo when I'm talking because my voice is also being picked up on Heather's microphone. I'm going to play this part again, but then I'm going to disable Heather's audio so you can hear the difference when there's no mic bleed versus yes mic bleed. Critically acclaimed podcast in the middle of the woods right now, but believe it or not, you don't have to just use this setup in the, I don't know if you heard, but I just sounded more isolated there, and that's really what you want. If we were sitting further apart or we were at opposite ends of the table, this wouldn't be an issue, and then in those situations, you can just put your audio in like normal, maybe adjust your level so each person's balanced, and then you're good to go. In this case, since there is that mic bleed, what I've been doing with this segment is being a little more in depth with how I'm editing it. Basically, the parts where Heather's not talking, I'm just cutting out my audio and vice versa. And that's something that usually does improve podcast audio quality if you just have the person who's talking, their audio active, and you don't have other audio just sort of hanging out there. But sometimes like the juice just ain't worth the squeeze and the difference is so small versus the amount of time it saves to not do that. But in situations like this, it sounds significantly better if I am doing that. And again, that's just because of how we positioned ourselves. I could have just gotten by with just one microphone and we could have just had even a simpler podcast setup. So I just wanted to point out a little bit of those editing tidbits because that's something you could run into, no matter what microphone you're using, although I do really like these ones. I really like the Interview Pros because we could level things up. This is simple, right? You could expand. We could have mic stands. We could have monitors. We could have all the things. But this is simple, and that's what we're going for. And these don't need mic stands because they're really, really relatively impervious to handling noise. They're also pretty good at rejecting plosives. It's not windy out here. If it was, I could put the windscreens on here, the pop filters, and we'd be good to go.
And we'd be good to go.
And we can just sit here and talk. And another thing, I'm lucky enough to be married to you for many reasons.
This is true.
One of the reasons is that you know how to use microphones.
I guess I do, huh?
Yeah, you're good at mic
Look at me go.
You got mic technique. But you know what? With the omnidirectional pickup pattern, you notice how I'm moving this microphone all around. But the sound shouldn't be changing if it's close, if it's far away, if it's kind of pointed in the right way, the wrong way. If I put it over here, it's going to sound weird. But as long as I have it in the general vicinity of my face, it's going to sound fine. Now, something I want to point out is that you do not have to use the Rode Interview Pro for this setup. Basically, anything that records audio can work. Even just two phones. Use a voice memo app or a voice recorder app and have you and the other person just record into your phones and combine the audio. You can use simple audio recorders like the Zoom H1, or if you have these wireless systems like the Rode Interview Pro or the Rode Wireless Pro, so many different product names, or something like the DJI Mic 2, any of these kinds of systems that can record internally to the transmitters, you can do the same thing there. Anything that records audio will work, but there are a couple of reasons that I do recommend the Interview Pro, and a big one, it is a microphone, so the big reason is sound quality, which is something that is always subjective, but I do really love the sound of this microphone just straight out of the box, no processing, no EQ. But of course you can EQ it and tweak settings in Rode Central if you want, and what's cool about that is you go into Rode Central, you adjust settings, it kind of looks basically like what you would see on a Rodecaster Pro, and then those settings save internally to the mic. So a caveat there though is if you have multiple microphones and you EQ them differently, make sure you find a way to know which one is which. Because say you have one microphone that's EQ'd specifically for your voice as the host, and then you have another microphone that's maybe more of a generic EQ for the guest or something, or even no EQ, making sure you know that you're always using the one that's set up for you and they're always using the other one is going to be very helpful. So some way to mark your microphones if they do have different EQ saved internally. That is an idea with high IQ about EQ. I do also really like that the Rode Interview Pro has 32-bit float internal recording, which of course the Zoom H1 Essential does, the Rode Interview Pro, the DJI Mic 2 also have 32-bit float. Whatever your recorder you're using, if it has that, that's really helpful because then you have no worries about being too loud or too quiet. But this also has 32 gigabytes of internal storage for 32-bit float, which basically means that'll give you about 40 hours of recording time, and the battery lasts about 30 hours. So what I love about these is they charge really fast, and then you pretty much never have to worry about running out of power or space. It just, again, takes some of those concerns that you normally have when you're recording something or producing a podcast and just gets rid of them. So you don't have to think about it. It gives you lots of peace of mind, and then you just focus on recording your show because everything is kept really simple. I talked about this at the beginning of the video when we were outside, but I really do love the omnidirectional pickup pattern because even though there can be mic bleed when the mics are very close to each other, it does give you that flexibility of not having to worry about having perfect mic technique, which is really great anytime you're doing something, it makes your life easier. But if you're going to ever hand a microphone to someone else, especially if they're not used to using microphones, it really does make your life a lot easier when their volume isn't constantly going up and down because they're moving further or closer to the microphone. The Interview Pro does come with a windscreen included, so you can just do that right there. But if you don't want the Rode branding, or you just want something that maybe marks the microphone a little more easily, like this is a blue one that could go on my microphone, a purple one could go on Heather's microphone. This is actually from reporterstore.com, and this is one that's designed for the Sennheiser MD46, but it fits really well on the Interview Pro. And then even if I'm out in crazy wind or someone's very, very breathy and full of plosives, this is going to protect the microphone from all of those plosive potential problems. Pretty please. And even though I am encouraging you to just use these as standalone recorders in this setup, because that does keep things really simple, if you do have something like the Rode Wireless Pro or a Rodecaster Pro, you can pair this microphone or these microphones directly to the Wireless Pro receiver or the Rodecaster Pro receiver. So if I did have this connected to my camera, I can pair these microphones directly to it, and then that way I'm just running the audio straight into my camera and I don't have to sync anything during my editing. But that's obviously not really practical if you're not doing a video podcast and you don't have a camera or you don't have this extra gear, which is why the fact these can just be standalone recorders. And also if you do have something like the Wireless Pro or the DJI Mic 2, these are good sounding microphones, but a lot of times, I just kind of feel like having a microphone positioned in front of you is going to give better sound most of the time than typically where lavalier microphones are positioned, which can still sound great, but sometimes need a little bit more EQ Or again, especially if you're working with someone that's not used to dealing with microphones, you have to position this on them. Sometimes hair or clothing or something ends up rubbing against it, and you record a whole podcast not realizing that there's some weird, goofy interference that's causing some kind of problem. This is just so much more foolproof. You hand this to someone, as long as they're holding it in this general area, it's going to sound great. And if you are doing an audio-only podcast, this is literally everything that you need. Well, except a podcast host. And not just you as the podcast host, but a host for your podcast. So thank you to Buzzsprout for sponsoring this video. When you've got your simple podcast setup or even a complex podcast setup, Buzzsprout has everything you need to get your podcast up and running, listed in all the major directories, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon, and more.
Buzzsprout will guide you through every step of the setup process. From there, uploading your episodes is a breeze. Just drag, drop, and hit publish. Buzzsprout takes care of the rest.
Something else that's really cool, whether or not you're even a paid customer, is all of the resources that Buzzsprout has for podcasters. So from written guides that cover every step of the process to a very awesome YouTube channel and even the Buzzcast podcast, Buzzsprout has everything you need to start podcasting and then keep podcasting. And once you've uploaded your episode, there are also other cool features that Buzzsprout has.
Yeah?
So in the past, I've talked about magic mastering, which means once you upload it, you have peace of mind knowing that your episode is going to sound as good as possible on pretty much the widest range of listening devices possible. But something else that's pretty new that I really, really enjoy is called Fan Mail. Fan Mail lets you put a link in your show notes so listeners can send a text message directly to your show. This is really one of the easiest and most fun ways that I've found to help people feel comfortable interacting with your show because it's such low pressure. It basically feels like they're just sending a text message, and then podcasting, which can sometimes feel like a one-way street, you talking to the audience, can now become a dialogue where they can also send messages to you much more easily. And of course, the same way that my lovely wife supports me, Buzzsprout and their awesome customer support team will also support you, because everybody on the Buzzsprout team is genuinely passionate about podcasting and helping everybody reach their podcast potential. So thank you again to Buzzsprout for sponsoring this video. And if Buzzsprout seems like a good fit for you,
check out the link in the description below.
yeah. And just like Buzzsprout might be a good fit for you as a podcast host, why might a portable podcast setup like this be a good fit for some people? One thing I want to be super clear about is I'm not saying that you should never use a traditional podcast setup, like a broadcast microphone into a mixer. This is not one of those either or things. Like you should use this and never that. They just serve different purposes, I think. And I do think, though, that a small setup like this has a few huge benefits, which obviously being portable is the biggest one. You can produce a show while traveling. You can produce episodes from totally different locations. That portability is also a good solution if you don't have a dedicated space to keep your equipment set up all the time. Like here, I'm lucky. I have right back there, I can have roadcasters and microphones set up all the time where I can just turn them on and start recording at the push of a button. But not everybody's in that situation. If you are in a shared space or you need to set up your audio recording gear every time you want to record something, and you have to set up a big old thing like that with a bunch of power cables and XLR cables and microphones and headphones and all that stuff, that is probably going to be something you're not going to want to do very often. If you have to set things up and tear them down every time you want to use it, it eventually just becomes easier to just not do that. And so a simple setup like this makes it easier to actually make stuff, because there's literally no setup. Just turn these on, press record, and you're done. And of course, that portability and the fact that these microphones are called the Interview Pro means that they are really great for events and things that might not be just specific long podcast episodes. So we're out here recording this critically acclaimed podcast in the middle of the woods right now, but believe it or not, you don't have to just use this setup in the middle of the woods.
Yeah.
You can use this anywhere. Like we have gone to conventions and events for YouTube related things and broadcasting related things. Sometimes you meet people at those events and you go, oh man, I'd love to record a podcast with you. I'd love to sit down and talk with you for a bit. Then you have to schedule it, or you end up doing it remotely. With something like this, you can just find a quiet corner in a lobby or a convention hall, sit down, talk to someone. It's so easy and so low pressure. You don't even need to do a full episode. If you just found someone that you wanted to talk to for 5 or 10 minutes, get a quick clip to put in an episode of your show. This just makes gathering the resources you need to make the best show possible that much easier. And when there's little to no friction in a workflow, you tend to do that workflow more often, right? Ultimately, my goal here is to show you the idea of what is essentially 2 audio recorders being a really simple podcast setup.
Yep.
And I gave you 0 prep work, right? I
Yeah,
just
no,
handed you
you
the mic.
handed me the mic.
And it's just that easy. And speaking of things that are easy, it's easy to support the channel like all of these fine folks here. So thank you.
member.
Yes, remember to become a member. Thank you for supporting the channel. And if you've wanted to start a podcast but don't know where to begin, check out this complete beginner's podcasting guide right here.